pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Knudsen?
Here.
District 1 Morset?
Here.
District 2 Yaku?
Here.
District 3 Bernard?
Here.
District 4 Wyland?
Here.
District 5 O'Malley?
Here.
District 6 Burchell?
Here. All right, at this time I'd like to recognize Police Chief Marty Jensen to come forward and present awards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, at approximately 10:10 p.m. on Tuesday, September 7th, 2010, Ms. Sharon Horn Elstrom walked into Ellie's on Main and collapsed. Ms. Horn Elstrom was having a heart attack and she was dying. Within seconds of her collapse, bartender Bill Peterson came to her aid and began CPR. Hudson firefighter and EMT Jay Penfield was next door at Barker's Restaurant when the 911 call went out. Mr. Penfield rushed to Ellie's and assisted Mr. Peterson until Officer Jeff Willems of the Hudson Police Department arrived. Officer Willems was told by Mr. Penfield that Ms. Horn Elstrom was not breathing and did not have a pulse. Officer Willems had brought in from his squad car an AED, automatic electronic defibrillator. They placed the AED on Ms. Horn Elstrom, and the machine instructed the two responders to give her a shock, which they did. Once this shock was given, Ms. Horn Elstrom's heart began to go back into a rhythm. Officer Willems and Penfield continued CPR until EMS arrived and took over the care of Ms. Horn Elstrom, who was taken to a hospital where she fully recovered. Because of the actions of Mr. Peterson, Jay Penfield, and Jeff Willems, Ms. Horn Elstrom is here tonight to witness these three men receiving the Hudson Police Department Life-Saving Award. Mr. Peterson is not here this evening. However, I would like to bring Mr. Penfield and Mr. Willems forward at this time. Come on, gentlemen. Ms. Horn was telling me that the doctors were saying how impressed they were. The quick response by these two gentlemen and Mr. Peterson actually saved her life. So, in recognition of that, gentlemen, Mr. Penfield, here you go. Congratulations. Thank you very much. And Mr.
All right, that's great. Thank you. Consent agenda, would you read those, please?
To approve the regular and closed session minutes of October 4th, 2010. To approve claims for payment in the amount of $292,490.38. A detailed description is available in the clerk's office on request, and it is posted on the city's website. To schedule a public hearing for Monday, November 8th, 2010 at 6:55 p.m. to consider the application of Universal Transportation Services, LLC for a taxicab service license. To approve the request for the Hot Air Fair event, February 4th through 6th, 2011. To place on file the update on projects report provided by Bonestro engineer Chuck Schwartz. To approve the following Hudson Municipal Court hours of operation as recommended by Municipal Judge Garrity. Office hours Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Initial appearance and pre-trial conferences Wednesdays at 3:30 p.m. Trials, fourth Wednesdays of each month at 1:30 p.m. To approve the appointments of Christine Hines as Municipal Clerk of Court and Dana Thompson as Deputy Court Clerk, and the requirement that Ms. Hines be bonded. To approve the council meeting dates for 2011 as presented. To place on file the quarterly reports of the Police Chief, Fire Chief, Water Utility Director, and the Building Inspector, and the following meeting minutes of October 12th from the Public Utility Commission and October 6th for the Joint Fire Board. And that is all.
All right. Consent agenda. What's your pleasure?
Move for approval.
Second. Motion and second to approve. Any, let's see, roll call vote.
Morset?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Wyland?
Yes.
Burchell?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Yaku?
Yes.
All right, the consent agenda is approved. Let's go back. I skipped comments and suggestions from citizens present. not all were present. Anyone here would like to address the council tonight on any item not on tonight's agenda, but that might have an impact on the city of Hudson, or that the common council may address at a future meeting? This is your chance. Come forward up to the podium and introduce yourself and be heard. Is there anyone who'd like to address the council tonight? Okay, let's move on to the Finance Committee. We've got applications for operators licenses. Staff recommended approval of these 4 regular operators licenses, and the Finance Committee also recommended approval.
Mr. Mayor, I recuse myself.
Mr. Morissette is recused.
Move for approval.
There's a motion and a second to approve the licenses. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. And licenses are approved. Next, we've got the general obligation promissory note to borrow $411,000 for short-term financing. It's being borrowed instead of bonding this year for our capital needs. It's coming from First American Bank N.A. at an interest rate of 2%. It's a single payment note. We'll pay it off on June 1st next year. And
Or earlier.
or earlier.
Bonding is done.
Move to suspend the rules then?
There's a motion to suspend the rules towards adoption of Resolution 2110.
Second.
In a second. Any discussion on the suspension? Roll call vote.
Yakub,
Yes.
O'Malley,
Yes.
Wyland,
Yes.
Morset,
Yes.
Bernard. Yes. Burchell.
Yes.
All right, the rules are suspended. You can consider adopting 2110.
Move to approve Resolution 21-10.
Second.
All right, motion and a second to approve Resolution 2110. Any discussion on the resolution? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Resolution's adopted. Item number 6 is the recommendation for the proposed 2011 fire service contracts with the Town of Hudson, Town of Troy, Village of North Hudson. At the Joint Fire Board, there's been some discussion about changing the way that costs are allocated. It's been done entirely on equalized value. The request from some of our municipalities that are being served is to change to a formula that would be calculated 50% equalized value, 50% based on the 5-year average run volume. And what we've worked out is a contract. We're asking for your approval of the language in here, and then we would send it off to those municipalities for their approval. There have been some changes. First, a couple of the specifics. In exchange for changing the way that the costs are allocated, what we asked for was a longer-term commitment from those other municipalities. And what we're asking for is a 10-year agreement that would roll every year to another 10 years. So that as purchases are made, that cost would then be allocated out over a 10-year period. And so it's a longer-term commitment. Currently, it's a 1-year agreement, and it calls for renegotiation to happen starting before June of each year. Catherine, what are some of the other things?
Well, that was the main one, and then now I think you should have in front of you the fee change. This shows the actual cost, what it will be under the 50% equalized and 50% 5-year run average. And I guess the other thing that the city is asking is that it be phased in so that for 2011 it's calculated 75% equalized value and 25% based on the 5-year run, so that the city doesn't take the full increase in the first year. The other change is that for purchase of capital assets, that will also, recovery of those costs by the participating municipalities will be over a 10-year period, and the agreement will be in effect for that same period, so that if someone withdraws, and that's an effect of the rolling period, actually. If someone withdraws, they have to stay in for the remainder of the 10-year term and would have to pay up any, if there were any balance owing on a capital purchase, they would have to pay that up before withdrawal. For example, if they had previously given a withdrawal notice and a capital purchase was made after that, they would still be required, as I understand it, to pay up their share of the capital purchase before withdrawing.
So then there was some language in paragraph 4 that's in the draft that was on your table that the Finance Committee recommended striking. And that starts at the sixth line from the bottom, at the beginning where it says for capital assets costing more than.
Right, and the reason for that is it's now what we're proposing is a 10-year term.
And then everywhere where it says 5-year in here, it would be switched to 10-year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is what we're kicking back from what they sent us originally?
Well, it wasn't that formal.
Okay.
This has been discussed at the joint fire board a few times, but it never really got to the point of a formal negotiation. But I attended the fire board at their last meeting, and we did some, and I can't bind the city and they can't bind their respective municipalities, so we're in the situation of we can try to work out what might be acceptable and then bring it to you. You ultimately have the right to just say no to this. If you do, the joint fire board members have indicated that they would expect their municipalities to enter an agreement again for next year on the same terms as what we've had. But then they'd like to continue this discussion during 2011 towards changing it for next year. There is about a $25,000 a year additional cost for the city. We're bearing a greater proportion of the cost of running the fire department under this new formula. For example, the town of Troy has high equalized value but relatively few fire calls. And so it benefits them the most. It's almost a wash for the town of Hudson, and it benefits North Hudson a little bit. You've all got that sheet in front of you, what the impacts are going to be.
Well, the push for this increase is kind of stemming from the lack of resources for capital expenditures.
If you go back to the negotiations that have been going on with surrounding communities, there has been a discussion with River Falls and Troy, how they're actually going to pay for runs, and they've changed their formula. And this kind of conversation, from what I understand, has been going on around the state. What's the right way to figure out what the value of fire service is? I think that got a lot of people in the hallway here. I think that the value to the city, right, as the mayor pointed out, if we talked about building a new building, but we didn't have any partners in a couple of years, we'd be carrying the entire cost. Yet there's a benefit of entering into an agreement. There's a benefit long-term of saying, okay, if you're going to stay in this agreement with us, we purchased equipment together and we amortize it. So
Okay.
there's a cost to us, and phased in over 2 years.
I think there's an argument to be made for not changing it at this time. Because if we go to a per run basis, that assumes that all runs are equal when we know they're not. A fire at a single bedroom bungalow in an older part of Hudson is nothing like a fire out on the township with nearby outbuildings and larger homes, etc. So the valuation, the equalized valuation, does go some steps toward recognizing that fact, that there are differences in fire calls. And so because of that, I think there could be an argument made for not changing from the equalized valuation basis that we have today.
One of the discussions we had on the fire board was another theory, and that is the open land of the same value as homes. So there's a lot of discussion about, we've got a lot of farm fields that have value. So is there a different valuation? Do you value it? And what's your insurance cover? Basically, you're buying insurance coverage for your municipality to say that the fire department is going to show up. So there was we talked about a couple of different formulas. This one seems to be the one that's taking root around a number of municipalities in the area.
Correct me if I'm wrong. What we're trying to do is protect our game, what we have in this, so we're not stuck without a chair when the music stops and everybody decides to pull out. Correct?
Well, that's part of it. I mean, each time we have to buy a new fire truck, for example, and can be upwards of $500,000 to buy a big fire truck. What's happened in the past is the city borrows the money for it.
The city borrows.
The city borrows the money for it, and then our partners pay, and they have a 1-year agreement that is annually renewed. So in your analogy of musical chairs, I mean, we would always be the one who doesn't have a chair.
Right.
We don't have the... So it is to our benefit to have a longer term agreement. And you remember when the Frisbee study was done and talked about increased facility needs. And at the time that report came, and I said, any facility improvement needs to be tabled until we have a different agreement with our partners. I don't see how we can build a building that is big enough to serve the whole community when we have no long-term commitment from the whole community. So, I think there's a give and take. It's $25,000 a year. It's a 2-year phase-in. So for us, it'd be $12,500 to find in the budget this year and $12,500 for next year. And I think it might be good for us in the long run to take this deal.
And as the mayor pointed out at another one of our meetings, our population isn't growing, their population is. So at some point, the distribution will change
They'll have more fires.
and more runs.
Do we amortize, Devin, our fire equipment, our truck? Well, the last truck was almost $500,000, 460, I think. Did we amortize that over 10 years or 20?
We allocate, well, it's semantics. Amortize is what the city does on their fixed assets. We allocate any item that is included in the city's notes that we borrow with, whether it's $500,000 or whether it's $30,000, we allocate over 10 years if it's included in the borrowing.
Okay.
If it's not, for example, the truck they purchased this year? Last year was not, because the money was not part of the note. So therefore, it hit their budget all at once.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, any asset that we borrow for is allocated over 10 years.
And that was the recommendation why this was changed from a 5-year to a 10-year
Well,
contract.
it has to be. Otherwise, the formula still falls flat.
Right.
As the mayor pointed out. They could pull out and we'd still have some years left to pay on a fire truck.
Yep.
Not very likely they're about to go pop for $500,000 for their own fire trucks, but still, I get the point.
What are you looking for, a motion, a recommendation?
Yes.
Both?
I'll move the recommendation from finance.
That's 75-25 for the first year?
Correct, 75-25 for the first year, 50-50 for the second year. It's a 10-year agreement, and the second part of section 4, which starts with
For capital
For
assets.
for capital assets continuing is no longer necessary because it's a 10-year contract.
I'll
Is there a
second that.
second?
Mhm.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We'll contact them and communicate that. Next, we've got consider library allocations for 2011 under unfinished business. We talked about this at a prior meeting before we had looked at our entire budget. One of my points at that time was it wasn't good budgeting to make promises to certain departments without looking at the whole budget. As I looked at my budget recommendation, I thought that I could see a way that we could go for 3%. I recommended a budget that included a 3% increase. There were a lot of cuts in that budget from the department requests. Devin and I sat down and cut what was about $400,000 out of that. And you recall the 6.5% was discussed and was not approved here on a 4-2 vote. Because the council was split, I thought I would bring you a recommendation that I thought might be a compromise between those that were supporting the 6.5 and those that were supporting the 0. At the Finance Committee, the vote was 2-1 to stick with the 0%. So the budget, as it stands right now, is in the Finance Committee's recommended budget. The library stands at the same support level as was for 2010, and which also happens to be the same as it was for 2009. It's about an $8,000 item. It can be done within our budget. Like all budgeting, it means something else has to give. And so with that, because this item came, we only took on the whole budget, we did most of it by consensus. There were only a couple of items that we took votes on. One was on the item that we just discussed, the fire contract, because that had an impact. We voted on that. We also voted on this one, and so I brought those two items back for the full council. And I think it would help if the library and our other municipal partners in the joint library knew where we stand on this. So with that, the Finance Committee recommendation is that there be a 0 increase in funding for the Hudson Joint Library in 2011.
I will move the mayor's recommendation of a 3% increase for 2011.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion?
I don't see how we can improve this increase when we just increased, we just spent $12,500 for the net first, next year and the year beyond for fire.
That is, well, that was calculated in the recommended budget, so that's already in there.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Going once? Twice? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
4-2, motion failed. All right. So it looks like we're sticking to 0%. All right. Now we've got number C under new business. Consider forming an urban forestry board. There's a issue sheet in here from Tom Zuley. I called Tom this afternoon and I said, Tom, it seems like the structure of what you're proposing makes sense, but it's pretty similar in its composition to the actual park board. And I wondered if maybe we could expand the duties of the park board, if not its composition, but maybe just the duties, to make it something like the Parks and Forestry Board or you name it. That was a brainstorm. I mean, I hate to start a whole separate committee with extra meetings that staff need to go to. There is a cost to that. Down under funding source, it's not available. It's hard to tell how much this costs, but it does take extra time. And it was my feeling after thinking about this that this group would be covering items that oftentimes would be on park property, and they'd end up having to coordinate pretty closely with parks. And so that's my thought. It's not any more thought out than that. Tom, why don't you tell them what you've got in mind here?
Well, first of all, this is just a draft. I just wanted to get it initiated that we could form some kind of a committee, whether it is a subcommittee of the park board But there are trees that, along with park trees that are boulevard trees that should have direction from the Public Works also. One of the thoughts here was that we establish a tree board, was one of the requirements for establishing Tree City USA. That's one of the main components. We have completed all of the requirements except for developing a tree board.
They won't recognize us if it's involved with the park board? It has to be a separate identity?
No, it could be. I think several communities have the park board as a tree board, advisory board, so it certainly could be. My only question would be, there's a lot of gifted and talented people that would like to be, citizens that would like to be on that board also, so if we could incorporate the park board and have like a subcommittee where we could get some of those people involved, would be a great help.
Yes?
Can't we just amend the number of people on the park board and can we add people to the park board? I mean, I know the boards are set with so many people, but instead of having a subcommittee.
I think you could do it that way, or as there are vacancies on the park board, you could seek some individuals who've got more tree experience.
Could you still have it where you had these people, even if they weren't on the park board, be it like an advisory, just to get information from these other citizens, or?
Does it have to be 7 people?
No, this is just a draft. This is just to get things rolling and get the
What's
discussion
the minimum
rolling.
requirement to be recognized as Tree City?
Tree City USA, just to have something designated in the city that has, states that the city has a tree board within the city. So it could be park board also, as long as it says something in the title that's park board / urban forestry.
Well, let me take another crack at this. How about it was our Public Works Committee, and we picked a couple of citizens when there were tree-related issues that would come in and would constitute, along with the Public Works Committee, would constitute our tree board. I'm just trying to keep this as simplified as possible. I mean, a lot of these people are going to be together.
I agree with you. I'd written down 2 instead of 4. I think you just said 2. And so I will make a motion that we do create this tree board consisting of a member of the Common Council approved or appointed annually by the mayor, the Director of Public Works, and 2 additional citizen members to be appointed for perhaps a 3-year period instead of a 5-year period.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Seems redundant.
Wait a minute. Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. Lori?
It seems like that's sort of removing it from Public Works, though, other than the director would be involved. I thought we were leaning more towards sort of a subset of Public Works.
So then
So the person
you'd like,
who's appointed by-
the Public Works Committee to be to serve in place of the member of the Common Council to be appointed. Well, I'm fine with that. I will amend my motion if it's okay with the seconder. That we remove the single person appointed by the mayor and instead put in there the Public Works
I just
Committee.
think it needs to be working in concert with Public Works and not sort of off on its own.
Lee, are you okay with that amendment?
Yep.
Anything else, Lori?
Just for clarification, is that we are setting up a separate urban program, forestry board?
Or parks.
Would you be open to sending this to Public Works, work it out in committee, and
Yes.
send back a recommendation?
I will.
Public Works don't want it.
I think you also, if you want this Tree City designation, you better find out what they, Tom and I also talked about this, and he said you get points for having that on grant applications.
All right.
And if
The
you're going,
requirement states here that to receive Tree City USA award, a committee must meet the 4 standards. It must have a tree board, commission, or public municipal department that has legal responsibility for the care of public trees and has the authority to develop and administer a community tree management program. whether that's Public Works Committee or the,
I think you're gonna need some document, like an ordinance, setting up this committee and saying what it's empowered to do to satisfy those
Given
folks.
Catherine's comment, I will rescind my initial motion and let us just refer this to Public Works, and we'll hash it out there and bring it back.
Everybody okay with that? We'll just send this to Public Works Committee work and come back.
It seems like a good approach to trying to handle the tree.
Yeah, because we're going to have to write a lot of grant applications.
Yeah, and if we can get some.
Okay.
points.
Sounds good.
All in favor of that?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Beautiful. 21 now, okay. Communications, what do we got? Anything from any alderperson? What about leaf pickup? It's coming pretty soon.
Here's Alan.
I think everyone received a card in the mail, so just pay attention to the card, and if we have a leaf drop-off point.
Come on, it wouldn't be fall if you didn't do that.
It begins this Saturday, October 23rd, and goes for 3 consecutive Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And in the intervening 2 weeks, we are open Tuesday through Thursday, and that is from noon to 4 p.m. Excuse me, noon to 7 p.m. On the weekdays, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on 3 consecutive Saturdays. Please don't everybody wait till the last Saturday, because that's what you do every fall, and we really get jammed up. Also, please remember, no plastic bags this year. If you bring your leaves in plastic bags, you're going to have to take them out of the plastic bags and put them in the dumpster, because Veolia brings them to Minnesota, which won't allow plastic bags anymore. You asked for this announcement.
You're not done yet, though.
So where do you get these other bags?
You can find them online at biolife.org, or you can find them at any of the Home Depots, Lowe's, home appliance stores. They're $2 for 5 of them. End of announcement.
Okay, anyone else? City Attorney?
Better return my plastic bags.
City Administrator?
Real briefly, the fall election, general election is November 2nd. Same polling places as always. If you have questions on where you should vote or whether or not you're registered, please contact City Hall ahead of time so we can get you to the right place. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Are absentee ballots currently available?
Absentee ballots are available. Staff can do that right now, and the week prior to the election, we will have election workers available here at City Hall in room 211 to process, as we did for the last election.
Okay. At this time, we've got noticed to go into closed session pursuant to section 1985 1E of Wisconsin statutes to consider deliberating or negotiating regarding the possible purchase of property at 501 Front Street.
Move to go into closed session.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to go into closed. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Morset?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Wyland?
Yes.
Birchall?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Yaku?
Yes.
Okay, motion passed. Anybody want to take a brief break before we do that?
Good letter.
Want to just charge ahead? All right, as soon as the room gets cleared, we'll go for it.